You're muted, by the way.
Probably help if I wasn't muted.
Just a little.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Nice. How was your week?
Okay. The video from our last meeting kind of got corrupted, so I couldn't review my notes, so I didn't get as much done as I would have liked.
Oh, no. Oh, okay. Are you recording this now?
Yeah. Well, I
Awesome.
record all our meetings because that's a lot easier than taking notes.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's perfect. Actually, that's a great strategy, period. More people should do that.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. How was your week?
Uh, well enough. Got a little sick. Still feeling a little under the weather, but beyond that, I'm okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. We did too. We got kind of sick in the house too. Is it just like a cold or
Just a cold. I
Mhm.
normally wouldn't have cared, but it happened during a work day, so
Ooh.
can't work with food if I'm coughing and sneezing.
Yeah, no kidding. How's the work going?
Well enough. It's McDonald's. It's the night shift. I definitely miss sunlight. That's a thing I'm missing.
Have you asked? I think you mentioned before that you were going to ask if you could do a day shift.
Yeah, getting around to it. But part of the problem with me asking for a day shift is that I find the night shift really enjoyable because it's a lot more lax. Like if I want to do stuff on my phone or something, I can do that in a spare
Mm,
moment. I can't do that in a day shift,
right.
and there's a lot less to do in a day shift. So
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I guess so. Yeah, night. Is it the case that what they do at night is they do all the cleanup and
yeah,
organization and stuff? Yeah.
yeah, they clean up, restock, do some basic cooking. So it's hectic, but it's it works for me.
Yeah. Oh, good.
My concern is like the handful of day shifts I have done have been utterly boring, and have just been draining. Like because I can't be on my phone. I'm not restocking anything. I'm just sitting in front of one station and getting them one thing. It's extremely boring.
What do you do? Are you the cash? Or are you making food, or what are
I'm
you
making
doing?
food.
Yeah. I remember the first job I ever had was Burger King, and I remember that being not the most exciting thing in the world.
Like it wouldn't be bad if I could like have my headphones in because literally I'm just sitting there working like for the entire shift, so I don't think I really need to listen to anyone.
Hmm.
But like no headphones in a kitchen because it's a kitchen.
Hmm.
There's
No,
oil.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine they wouldn't want you to do it. That's a drag. That's a drag. I've worked jobs where you're not allowed to be on your computer or your phone or whatever, which and obviously in certain situations that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's safety or customer service, but um yeah, some jobs that would be torture to not be able to do that. That'd be crazy.
Hmm.
How did you find did you get
Oh, you muted yourself.
are you getting good enough time to write and stuff like that?
Yeah. Writing is not the problem. The problem is motivation. Now I notice that when the sun goes down, my motivation just like, I don't know if it's like some subconscious response to me thinking, oh, it's the end of the day, I should stop working, or something
Hmm.
else. I just know I'm so much less motivated to actually do stuff.
I can imagine. Yeah, that would be tough. Yeah, when you just have just enough energy to sort of be and
Hmm.
not really get creative and stuff. It's more beta brainwaves than alpha brainwaves, and that's tough.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough. Well, here, let's. I'll pull this up here. I love some of the changes that you made here. Going to just mostly make some suggestions along the line of how to kind of polish it up a bit, and then
Okay.
I want to sort of move into the next section here. I know we've spent 2 or 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks looking just at the beginning. I think that's good though. Almost everybody I work with, we always spend more time on those first few pages because that sets the tone, and a
Hmm.
lot of the sort of the rules, so to speak, to apply to stuff later comes in. So I love this. I love that you've really run with the idea of showing them kind of trying to find this place rather than just boom, they're in the lecture hall. And I think the amount of time you spent with them doing that really works. So a few little tweaks, if you don't mind me sharing, just along
No
the
problem.
way. Classroom, I would probably change to lecture hall because they're technically a room that huge is not a
Hmm.
called a classroom anymore. It's a lecture hall. Um, Here where Thomas says, "Are you sure we're going in the right direction?" and Rebecca says, "Pretty sure, maybe, no, I'm totally lost." My suggestion would be just those two lines, flip them, because if the whole point like have her say, "Are you sure we're going in the right direction?" and him say he's lost, because that symbolizes what's going down on his character arc. Here's a guy who thinks he knows where he's going, but he doesn't. So it's a perfect kind of a symbolic in dialogue, a symbolic representation of his whole character. And then it's also more interesting if you, I think, from my point of view, sure, going in the right direction. Rebecca asked, pretty sure. Thomas says, maybe. No, I'm totally lost. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Class starts in 10 minutes. I would cut through all of that stuff. You don't have to, but my suggestion would go right to her walking up to somebody and saying, hey, excuse me. So in other words, he said, she says, do you know where we're going? He says, no, I'm totally lost. She takes the initiative. I love that. I love that you have her going to, take the action and flashing her smile. If had already walked up to someone and then I saw someone and then later she asked, flashing her best smile at the man. I'm like, man, what man? Oh, is that the someone? I would clarify, someone is a man. And then because I didn't get that the man was someone, so I was a little confused. Okay. That might be me, a little thick in the noggin. Then when they do go looking, now here, the only thing that I would do is, and I was less concerned with needing to work out the nitty gritty in this particular reading, but I would encourage you, because they were walking down the hallway and then suddenly someone gives them direction and says that they actually have to leave the building, which I would clarify. Oh, sure. You take a left up at Spruce Road, and Spruce Road, are they outside? I thought he said they were inside. So I'm like, I just wasn't sure.
It's a college campus, so it's a bunch of buildings with a bunch of its own little community place, right?
Right. But if they're walking through crowded hallways in a university, the outside areas are rarely called hallways. They're the quadrangles and things like that.
Okay. So crowded that they've left the building.
I would just let us know when they're in and when they're out, so that when this dude says, yeah, go up this building, go up the blah, 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 or however, then I wasn't sure that they had come back in after two wrong turns, finally found their way to room 215. They walk through the crowds. Now, you usually don't enter a university lecture hall from outside. So I was like, okay, they're in, then they're out, then suddenly they're at room 215, but he hasn't said they're back inside a building yet. So I would just for the audience to sort of follow when they're inside or outside. I think that could be just a touch clearer. Mm-hmm. But it's good. What I'm loving that you're doing here is you're showing them getting lost and trying to figure out. Now, my suggestion originally, and I'll just sort of expand again here. My original suggestion wasn't merely to show them getting lost and trying to find where they were, but to take advantage. Usually you always want to, kill two birds with one stone if you can. This is a wicked opportunity to consider any additional dialogue that you may want to have, because a page, nearly 2 pages of them, or a page and a half of them simply being lost without a story purpose in being lost, felt like it's good. It's better than them just going to the classroom. It feels like there's more that you can do here with the, as they're trying to find it, either shorten the amount of time they're lost and trying to find it, or have them, talk, have him. I mean, if nothing else, if you were to go with the dialogue route, like adding more dialogue, anything that shows him confident that he knows what he's doing, but clearly not, is reinforcing again his whole character arc. This is a guy who thinks he knows what his future looks like, and he doesn't. Mm-hmm. And she represents that conscience, sort of that guiding light friend, whatever you want to call it, who's like, you sure you know where you're going? So that's what I would do. Is this was good. You laid down the skeleton of them getting lost. And now I would go in and season that hamburger that you just made, throw a little ketchup and mustard and pickles on this thing now, just to borrow a McDonald's analogy, and make it relative to his character arc. So by the time they sit down in this classroom, and then this is great. I love what you've done here. Again, lecture hall instead of classroom. I love that you're stretching this out. The thing that I love that you responded to from last session is that whether or not it's perfect yet, and of course it's not, it's your first draft on this. So I would never beat yourself up about that. The fact that you stretched it out and you said, okay, let's play with this a bit. Let's take a little more time showing them find the classroom. Let's show a little more time with them, sitting down and taking a look around. So you've done some fantastic things. All I want to do is decorate the tree a little bit and throw a little more juice in here. Little things like Thomas, as the two of them sat down, Thomas pulled out his textbook as he waited for Dr. Lake to show up. Thomas had barely pulled out his textbook. You don't want to say that twice, usually. And then now the description of Dr. Lake. So I got some questions for you. The way he comes into the room and the fact that, let me just see here. The fact that he walks into the room and nobody even seems to observe or notice that he's walked into the room apart from Thomas, because there's no reactions of other students as he's walking in. That's critical. That would be a real critical thing. He comes in and he looks like a bit of a bumbling weirdo, and I wasn't sure if that's what you're wanting, because I love the piercing green eyes, mop of messy blonde hair. These are really great descriptions. A tall lackey frame. I wasn't sure what you meant. A lackey is a servant, so I wasn't sure what you meant by lackey.
Oh, I think that autocorrection something.
Okay,
Lanky. I meant like
lanky.
yeah.
That works. Yeah. Perfect. I might say rather than wearing a stereotypical lab coat, I mean, this is your description, so don't let me try. I don't want to be too prescriptive here and tell you how you should describe him. But he comes in looking like a bit of a stereotype and a bit of a cliche. He comes in looking, he's got the messy hair, he's got the crazy eyes. You describe him as clambering onto the podium, which is technically means stumbling and fumbling and having an awkward time getting onto a podium. And that, well, it's a podium's just a platform. Why is he having such trouble standing up on a platform? So there might be a different, usually clambering is like when a big man is trying to get into a car that's too small kind of thing. So clambered, stereotypical, unshaven. And I think that's great because those things can suggest a person who's serious, but I'm not taking him seriously. And the fact that all of the students are basically ignoring him tells me that he's kind of I'm not seeing the Dr. Lake I think that Thomas worships. So, but it's a good first stab. So I think what I might do is say, how do you want him to come across? Do you want people to, and it'll be a combination of how you describe him and showing the other students respond.
I want him to come across as like, he's kind of projecting an appearance that he wants people to like, be like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
He wants attention, but he doesn't want to look like he's trying to get attention. So
interesting. Okay. And the fact that the challenge is, apart from the Oscar-winning smile, all I'm getting is a physical description of what he's wearing and how his hair looks and that kind of stuff. So I'm not getting, my suggestion would be zero in on this, even though it's just a brief like paragraph. Him entering the room is easily one of your top 3 most important things that happens in this scene, because it sets the expectations of your audience for who Dr. Lake is. So I would go beyond just the physical description to get really clear in your head. I'd draw him. And maybe you did already, but
I can't draw. I have terrible.
Okay. But I mean, I would look at what kind of a person would be taken seriously. He would probably, like, I love things like immaculately, his clothes were immaculately clean. Yep. I think I can see him being very tidy and having a lot of hair, but it's still pushed back. Maybe he's walking in a sort of a stiff and upright, slow, imposing way. Like, how would this, like, tell me about the pace, the speed at which he enters the room, the way he's holding himself, all of these things. Give me sort of a sense of grandeur, or at least he wants to, like, I love what you just said, project grandeur. That's great. And how are the students, as he walks in, responding? That's what I was really waiting to see. I was like, okay, I can't wait to see how the students respond to him. And then I was like, oh, there's no response.
Okay.
So I might have some sycophants worshiping him, some who are picking their nose, don't know who he is, and a couple who are just ready to, totally troll him.
Applauding, some people are still ignoring him, and some people are just getting ready for class.
Sure. Yeah. And that one troll, right? Like, just not a bad person, but like, you gotta get a troll or two kind of thing.
Like some guy in the background's like, show us your boobs.
You could be, and what I'd love is if you do that, just show us. I would even go further to show us your tits, and then I would have like the guy. There's somebody next goes, "Shut up! Do you know who that is? He wrote the book on whatever." Like, I want to hear some chatter. I want to see some irreverence from some, because that's the way they would be with any teacher, especially if Dr. Lake is this celebrated author, or he was once. Like, the impression I get of Dr. Lake is there probably was a time when he was like the hot new thing and respected, but he's sort of gone over here with his xenobiology, and now he's starting to.
Like, Lake's story is that he recently found an asteroid with aliens in it. His university and himself are using that to promote him. The university is doing this because, it's a university, he needs money, blah blah blah. Lake's doing this because he thinks he's the next Messiah. But now, Lake's big problem is that he discovered the asteroid That's it. He just pulled apart a rock, and he has nothing else to go with his name, so he's starting to peter out
Mm,
because he doesn't really have any specialized expertise in the field. He just got lucky,
nice.
and he's trying to get away from the fact that he just got lucky and prove how intelligent he is.
So his whole reputation, one way or the other, hinges on this discovery, which is brilliant because that's an even better, that's tight. That's an even better explanation of why when that one student stands up and tries to undermine that one thing that he's based his whole reputation on, that would be like his Achilles heel. You don't mock the meteorite because that's the only fucking thing he's got to stand on, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I love that.
He's
That's
not
perfect.
he's not special. He's mostly mediocre. He's only special because he was the one who happened to crack this thing open and figure out where it came from. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even the one who actually discovered it or brought it back to the lab. He was just, one of the grunts working on it.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I would do then in this description? I'm going to go back up here in a minute. What I would do, my suggestion would be, is amp up. I would probably shorten because you've got a fairly long description of but it works still. It's not too long. I might consider ways that you can slightly shorten the description of the science around this discovery and the tardigrade and all those kind of things, and focus it. Like I would add maybe a bit of maybe a paragraph or part of a paragraph of him really emphasizing the fact that he and he alone is the only one who has come to this realization. Like, without being like overly god complex about it. I don't mean he has to stand and goes, and me, no, me. It doesn't. I don't mean be melodramatic about it. He says, and it's only by an act of sheer luck and scrupulous observation that I was able to do this, and with careful study I was able to, like, he's describing how he did it, but he's clearly saying me. My suggestion would be along that line.
So rewrite the whole science thing.
I don't know. I think the science part is pretty solid. I think
Yeah, but
I would
I've noticed I've been having trouble trying to rewrite stuff, so I find it's just easier just to start over.
I love that. I do that too. I think people polishing this sounds terrible because it would suggest I think it's crap, and it's not. Polishing a turd. So many people waste so much time trying to fix something they've already written. I'm like, fuck no, don't do that. Go back and just rebuild the whole thing.
I know. I've done that. I've done that enough that I've given up on it. That sometimes like after the second rewrite, I'm like, okay, if it still has problems, I'm just doing the whole thing over again.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to try. Like, I love that. I love you. Definitely try a why create more work for yourself?
If you can finagle it back into place, then sure. If you can't, realize it's crap and just start over.
Good for you. Like, that's a really, really good habit for any writer to have, and I wish more people had it. So yeah, again, in the first little bit, I would while they're getting lost, give them something to talk about that emphasizes Thomas's confidence that he knows where he's going, and he clearly doesn't. They finally find where they're going, in which case you might want to shorten that a bit. I'm okay with a bit of getting lost. I'm okay if they've, by the top of the second page or maybe like second paragraph, they're there. Really emphasize him coming into the room. I love all the stuff you've got above it, though. I love the fact that they're sitting down, they're looking around, they're seeing this, and at least a dozen rows of seats, some playing on their phone. A lot of this stuff you can pull open and play with. I would be much more interested in seeing what you do with this, for example, for next week. And I've got a couple more thoughts here, and then move on into the next, the next part of the story. And we can come back and you can massage all the stuff into place. Okay. You've got a good foundation.
I should mention, I'm going to take out all the stuff from like after the bell rings, like after the class is dismissed, and put it into another document, because I feel like I feel like we're just sticking on to the top part too much. So I just want to get more separation.
Yeah, I love it. It's perfect. I might use a different word than experts, because I haven't seen very many experts today say that this requires a miracle of God. That is what the people, that's what religious people would say. That's certainly, but experts is pretty broad. That's what, that's what some of you probably heard growing. Like I wouldn't be afraid to be a little sarcastic about it. He says, for life to exist at all, never mind sentient life, requires a miracle of God. Perhaps you heard that in your little town, in your little church. Like, a lot of these kids have come from small towns to come to university.
I'm still not sure how I feel on the whole God thing. Like, on the one hand, I'm an atheist, so I don't really care either way.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I'm not sure if it's what Lake would do. And I hate saying that. I hate saying that's not what my character would do because I play in D and
No,
D,
that's a
and
good.
that's way too often used as an excuse for bad behavior.
What is?
That's what my character would do. Anytime
Oh,
if you
fair.
play D&D and you got a guy who's being just a complete ass, I guarantee you the first thing that's going to be out of his mouth is that's what my character would do.
Well, fair enough. And keep in mind, there was only, yeah, do obviously do what feels right for you. My original suggestion for sort of emphasizing the God thing was twofold. One is to sort of undergird the idea that eventually he sort of has this sort of God complex where he knows, he's all knowing, he understands what nobody else understands, and also, you know, going into the whole idea of there being life outside. But no, you don't have to go there.
Yeah.
Lovecraft barely ever does that. I keep picking him because he's probably the preeminent
Well, and
otherworldly
this is
writer.
primarily a Lovecraft story.
Hmm. Yeah, play with it. Play with it. I wouldn't feel like you got to marry yourself to it or jettison it either way. Again, when you've got a long string of explanation, you know, nearly a full page of dialogue, you definitely want to take a pit stop every once in a while, give us a reaction from the other students, from Thomas, from Rebecca, especially if Dr. Lake makes this fantastic triumphant thing. He says, you know, you've heard this, and this. Well, guess what? The experts are wrong. That's obviously a provocative thing to say. It invites a response. So you definitely want to have one. But yeah, I like your instinct to maybe shorten this up a little bit. And get to the point, which is, yeah, it is long actually. One, two, where does the doctor? Oh yeah, and then oh yeah, oh yeah. There you go. It's quite a number of pages later. I would give him a page, maybe two, to speak, and then I would combine the response of somebody saying, "Hey, question number one," and then maybe a question number two, and then have this objection from Ms. Mac.
Remind me, what was Miss Mac supposed to say? Because that's the one thing I can't remember from our meeting, and that was what I was really counting on the video for.
Oh yeah, we'll come down here. So it's sort of in this zone. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's sort of in this zone of she it would be counterproductive in my mind for her to try to attack the science of his argument because
Science is
she's even
proven.
less, the science is either proven or she's even less qualified to speak on it. All she could do is say, well, how do you know for sure? That's her best argument. um, but to me, going to the heart of it, my suggestion would be, you mentioned Dr. Cloud, but I have, you know, rather than an affidavit, which suggests that there was some kind of a legal action of some kind or a need for a legal statement, I might consider just that he wrote an article in a you know, highly respected peer journal rather than an affidavit. And this is the essence of it. You know, like the whole idea. Well, that's great. Where Dr. Isn't it? I mean, how can we know for sure? Yeah, this is the part that I would. Different situation. Yes, Mr. Mac. I would cut all of this. Like, I would get rid of that argument, which is,
Okay.
how can we know?
Yeah.
And focus right on academic.
The big thing with Dr. Cloud is that he was the researcher who actually got in charge of the meteoroids, but he was starting to suffer from Alzheimer's. So Lake stole the meteor from him, kind of.
Interesting.
Well,
Yeah,
basically,
if that.
he discredited the doctor because of his Alzheimer's and claimed that he'd been doing the work for years.
Mm-hmm. That's a dodgy. That's a really tough thing to. The only response I would have to that is, so he's, the danger of critiquing him on the basis of his Alzheimer's is twofold. Number one, it sounds like you're just being a dick to people with Alzheimer's. Number one. Number two, depending on when he had Alzheimer's, a lot of really smart people have written stuff in the past and then got Alzheimer's. That doesn't mean his argument, whatever he wrote in the affidavit or article, was wrong. And number three, let me get this straight. You stole your idea then from a guy with Alzheimer's. Like, it's a self-defeating argument. At some point, he says, well, he had Alzheimer's. Oh, really? So your big idea you got from a guy with Alzheimer's? Well, no, I mean, he was okay. No. Clean this argument up.
Okay. Cloud was a scientist working in a laboratory studying meteors. Lake was his assistant. Cloud starts to get Alzheimer's to the point where he can no longer functionally work, but he's still on the payroll because, like, you know, ego and pride. Lake discovers the meteor, and instead of bringing it to Cloud, he goes around him and submits the results as his own findings, claiming that Cloud hasn't done anything for the last couple of years, which is half
Mm.
true.
When are we going to find all that out in the story?
Uh, hmm. I wasn't actually sure. Part of it is like here and people slandering Lake. The other part of it is like, towards the end where Lake admits he just stole all his work in like a moment of insanity.
I'd be tempted to have her say it like a shorter. I don't know how you would abbreviate that per se, but I love the idea. If it was a movie, it would be the most magical moment for her. Of course, Lake wasn't prepared at all for the idea that one of his students would know this much. So the fact, especially if he says, I might have her say, well, I read an article by Dr. Cloud. Now, so I'm going off the reservation of maybe what your thing is. I read an article from this one person who said they weren't 100% sure. They had a different take on that meteorite, and they said that there's a couple of different ways to interpret it. Yes, well, if you do your research a little more, my young thing or whatever, you'll find out that there's more to the story than you think. What's funny you mentioned that, Dr. Lake, because I did do a little more digging, and it turns out that and then what do you say, it looks like you were working with him and there was question about where you got, like, whatever you want to reveal, I would have her drop it like a fucking mic in a sentence or two and just like boom right there in class, like go all the way with it, because right now it just looks kind of like it could be like, no, you don't have to do that. You can do one of two things. She drops the mic and totally exposes him, and then the bell rings. Mm-hmm. Or it's as simple as she says, yeah, well, it depends on how much you want to expose him, right? It could just simply be that because all you're trying to show here is that not everybody is kissing this man's ass. That's all you're really trying to show, and how he reacts when somebody doesn't kiss his ass. Like at some point, you don't have to overthink this too much. What is enough to give the impression that if you disagree with Lake, and yes, there are people that disagree with Lake, that he gets real cold real fast. So it's really uncomfortable to disagree with Lake. The people I'm the most uncomfortable around aren't people who are literally looking at me going, Paul, you're a dick, I hate you. They're the people who kindly tear me down every time I'm in their presence. Like it's just off the radar enough that I can't say, hey, did you see what a dick he was being? And they're like, well, no, he's just speaking his mind. That guy's being a dick. He hates you. But he's just subtle enough about the way he cuts you down that because he knows it gets to you. But he knows he's not going to get called on it because it's not obvious enough to other people that that's what he's doing. There's something in here still. You're close to it. I can feel it. But I think she's not going to argue. She's not going to successfully argument on the science. She's going to, the only thing she can do is make him look foolish in front of the other students. And that's what she's trying to do. There's something in that direction, and hit just a cold like reaction from him. And again, don't feel like he has to react. He could just look at her. This guy's been talking nonstop for 3 pages. And she has just simply stopped him in his tracks.
Maybe bring up like how the meteor is his only success and every other paper he's written has rather been disproven or is wildly inaccurate.
I love that. That would be the biggest emasculating undressing you could do of this man. He says, well, I read your article and it's great, but I have read other articles that, that have a different point of view and so on. And one of them even said that this is really kind of the only thing that you presented. And if there is no, life on Titan, then kind of your whole career falls apart, doesn't it, Mr. Lake? I mean, I'm just, not meaning to be critical, but if there's no life on Titan, why are you teaching? Like, almost goes that far. Right? Like almost goes that far. Because isn't that the point? Right? Like this is the house of cards that he lives in. This is why he so desperately needs to find this alien. I'm assuming this is the reason, is like, if he has gone this far, if he can't, it's sort of like, what's his fate? Edward Muntz in Up, I'm going to prove that these dinosaurs really exist, or the whatever, the bird or whatever. Yeah, I love that. I love your instincts there. Like, maybe I wouldn't be afraid. Like, I would have her be as nasty as you want her to be. I would rather that you brought that to me and we had to figure out how to scale it back than for you to um feel like you've got to be careful in this thing. Like, to
So basically,
me,
slam him as hard as I can with pointing out that the meteorite is literally his only claim to fame. The only reason
I
he even
want
has a job here, and that if he's disproven by, say, Dr. Cloud or someone else, then his entire life's work is down the drain.
yeah, and zing him back. Like, I would love you to bring me the most insulting bit of dialogue that you could from Ms. Mac that's purely factual, not her being mean to him, but factual. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dress it down and make it really politically correct, but it's still obvious that her points are still all coming through. It's what a good lawyer has to do. A lawyer has to, like, go right for the jugular, but make it sound like, hey, I'm just asking questions, right? And I would love it if he's, if he said, well, she just drops one thing. I would have her drop one little thing. Well, Dr. Lake, I just had one last question just before class is over. I read an article that actually, with one of the people you made that discovery with, Dr. Cloud or whoever, but somebody who definitely was there when it happened. And they said that, well, there's a couple of different ways to interpret that, and that you might be wrong. To which he's like, and it might be wrong. Let that sit for a second. Show us what the audience, like the students, are like. And Thomas is like, and not you are wrong in your thing, but you might be wrong. And then because she's intentionally leading him on, because she's just dropped enough to sound like she doesn't know what she's talking about, so that he can go at her and say, well, Ms. Mack, I appreciate that other different have people's points of view, but I would encourage you to do a little more research before you just, drop something like that. I mean, theoretically speaking, and she goes, oh, it's interesting that you say that. She's waiting for this. She dropped just a little bit so that he would gullibly fall for it, so that she could, and act all haughty, so that she could drop the real gold and say, well, actually, funny you say that. I did do research and and it turns out, yeah, there's a high likelihood that you are actually wrong. I mean, theoretically speaking, and have her say right back to him what he said, and then just describe him with the fucking daggers in his eyes. And he's got nothing to say. And then the bell rings. That kind of, like, to me, that would be like, I want him to be mad when that class ends. Like, but he's because this is the whole point. This is the whole point of this juicy scene. Rebecca's just said to Thomas, are you sure this is the guy you want to bet all the money you've got in the bank on? Absolutely. He's an expert. He knows exactly what he's talking about. And then this moment happens. And when he's mad and the bell rings, I want to see Rebecca. I want to see her reaction to this whole thing, because her reaction is way more important than anybody else's when she turns to Thomas and goes, this is your guy? Like, and she shouldn't say that. It's just obvious that's what she's thinking. Ooh, and then they meet. Excellent, Mr. Bennett. And that's the shit that's going to make people look at you and go, this guy knows how to do character.
Out of curiosity, I had another thought. I could mention that a probe is being sent to Titan to like actually disprove his theories, because that would give us like an actual timeline for which he has to get this done before the probe gets there. Otherwise, he might lose everything.
You could absolutely, you could eventually get to the point where there's this Ms. Mack is actually part of not a group or anything, but there are several people, we're going to find out, there are several people who seriously question Lake's discovery, seriously question whether he should be teaching anymore, which is why when they finally do, this is what's great, because what it sounds like you're setting up to me is that it's going to turn out that Lake is a phony. He's made this whole thing up, which is why when they actually do find an alien and they discover that Lake was right, that's even more scary. And that's even more dramatically, oh my God, this whole Bennett has been totally making me think that this guy was a fraud and a fake. And that when they get out to the Arctic, it's all going to be bullshit. And then they do find an alien. Ooh, that's good storytelling. So I would consider ramping up, and this is why workshops are so fun, because there was the original idea you had, and then we start talking about it and seeing what its potential is. Mac is the first of many people that we will meet throughout the story, potentially, or she's simply the representation of other people out there we may or may not see them, who are pretty sure this guy's a fraud. And imagine if
she's the spokesperson, for lack of a better word, for all the people who think he's full of shit. And to be fair, his personality helps reinforce that. And I'm also having other things happen, like the lab burns down and all the samples from the meteor are destroyed, so no one else can double check his findings.
Yeah, make him look guilty, make him look like a fraud, make him look like a con artist. Fool me into believing that, only for me in the end to realize, oh shit, the dude was right. And what a great way to introduce Thomas. Like, this is just easily my favorite thing you've written, just on his reaction alone to the reality that he shows up, he's bet all his money on this horse,
and it looks
the horse's first race, it breaks a leg. like oh shit, but he's in too deep now. He's moved, he's in residence or whatever.
He's only here on scholarship with Blake.
He's got pride on the line. He said no to something else that would have been I've been in this position. I've 100% been in this position where
you're in too deep.
And now I'm like, oh, I totally should have done that. I should have gone to MIT. I could have gone full ride or whatever the deal is, but I fell in love with the guy, and that's his problem. That's Thomas's flaw. He's worshiping idols. He's a sycophant. He's the typical first year university student he's not on his own feet yet. He's worshiping somebody else's ideas. And eventually that's going to be his character arc. He's going to do, by the time this is done, he will finally have found his voice. He will finally have found how to stand on his own 2 feet. Too late.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Anyway, food for thought. I'm excited about where this is going, though. I'll send you my notes, and that would be my encouragement, to just take one more stab at this opening sort of section. And the 2 parts I'm mostly interested in, while other students, Thomas and especially Rebecca, are reacting, is what it's like when he enters the lecture hall. What does that look like? A little more triumphant, a little more mystery. And number 2, the exchange with Ms. Mack. Those are the 2 things I'm looking for.
Okay.
Have some fun with it, and I'll send you these notes. Is Monday good for you on a regular basis?
Yeah, Monday's good for me on a regular basis.
Sounds good. Can we change it to 5:30 then?
Definitely. I was going to talk to you about that because I get up at like 3, so this is like you and me meeting at 7. So.
Okay, that's even better. Okay, I've got you down for 5:30 for next week then.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, well, good luck, my friend. You're on a good path.
See you next week.
Take care. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.